Thank you so much, Brand Innovators, for hosting this awesome event. And of course, Kimberly, for chatting with me. Kimberly is the Senior Director of Marketing and eCommerce for the Museum of Ice Cream. So glad we got to enjoy some ice cream at lunch. It would be hard to talk about it without having had it or without getting to have it soon. So I'm glad we got to do that. Thank you so much for providing that. My name is Olivia Eggleston. For those I haven't met yet, I'm with Nativo. We are a content marketing and technology company that helps brands take content and deliver it in feed and premium publisher environments where people are already consuming content and measure the impact of it. But we're not here to talk about Nativo. We're here to talk about Kimberly and the Museum of Ice Cream. So Kimberly, if you could give us a rundown of your role at the Museum of Ice Cream. You're not new to Brand Innovators, but you are pretty new to Museum of Ice Cream, having joined in August. So if you could give us a breakdown of your role at the museum and what you guys are working on, that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. First, I wanted to say I hope everyone enjoyed your ice cream today, but I cannot take credit as that was a local Atlanta Creamery sweet stack. If you haven't had a chance to check them out, they are phenomenal. If you didn't get a chance to try the ice cream, I feel very sad for you. And also, who are you as people, right? But we really appreciated Troy and his company coming in and serving everyone a sweet treat after lunch. So just wanted to give a big shout out to him. As Olivia said, I work for Museum of Ice Cream. I joined them in August and oversee all of what we consider to be our digital experience. So if you think about Museum of Ice Cream, and if you're not familiar with what Museum of Ice Cream is, it's an experiential museum all about ice cream. So the locations that we have are based out of New York. We have one in Chicago, we have one in Austin, and an international location in Singapore. But the full experience itself is an in-person experience. And so everything from the moment that you engage with us, whether it's on social media or all the way through your ticketing experience, all digital. The moment you enter our location, all a physical experience. And then the moment you leave, again, a digital experience. So we want to make sure that we have a really comprehensive customer journey, but more so that your digital experience matches that when you actually get into our location.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know if anybody here has had a chance to visit a Museum of Ice Cream by show of hands. Okay, there have been some people that have attended. It's an in-person experience, as Kimberly said, with a lot of digital touch points along the way. And I do think it's really interesting that for such a physical brand that does exist very much in the real world, there is a really important part of the experience that is digital. So can you talk about how you marry the digital experience both pre-visit and post-visit, and what you do basically to ensure that that is a cohesive experience from the digital to the physical experience, and how you use the digital experience to enhance the in-person experience?
Yeah, absolutely. So for those who aren't familiar, one of the biggest things with Museum of Ice Cream is our digital presence through social media. As you can kind of visually see, it's very beautiful. And so the space people love to take photos of, they love to share it on social media. But interestingly enough, what we like to really tout about Museum of Ice Cream is that when you get there, we want you to put your phone down. We want you to have personal experiences with your family and with your friends. But when you're in a really beautiful space, you also want to take pictures of those moments. You want to remember them. And that's a big portion of our digital journey and our digital experience, is leveraging the content that's created on our behalf. And so when we think about it as kind of that traditional marketing funnel, pulling guests in through brand awareness on a digital platform, but then actually having them themselves, once they visit the location, turn that funnel upside down into a megaphone and tell all of their friends and family about it. Because especially when it comes to something like this, where it's very difficult to kind of put into words what you're going to experience, it's really easy, though, to believe a friend or someone like an influencer or someone that you personally believe in to tell you, oh, this was so fun. Let me show you a little bit about it, but also let me show you the fun that I'm having with my family, with my friends. And so we're really leveraging that when it comes to building that digital experience, but in a really authentic way.
Are you doing that then? Are you relying then on just that organic content creation from people who visit the museums, and allowing that to just organically reach people in their social feeds from the people who've already attended, or do you work with influencer partners? Do you amplify that organic content in any way? Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So as everyone who is in the social media space knows, it's pay to play now. So regardless of what great content your friends, family, your influencers are putting out there, really to get that amplification, you are putting a lot of money, dollars behind your media. However, the really great thing is we have a really strong natural development of organic content that we can then choose from to be able to build more traditional ad media. So we have that really authentic experience of our guests enjoying the space with their family, with their friends. And so what's interesting about the space is that it's an emotional tie and it's an emotional space that you're selling. And so the best way in which to do that is to show people actually enjoying it, to show people that, hey, you know what, I can be that person. Or as a parent, personally, it's like, I need something to do with my kids during every single break that they have. Well, what's interesting to them? They probably aren't that interested if you have younger kids and maybe going to a traditional museum, but I can probably convince them to go to Museum of Ice Cream and eat unlimited ice cream and play. So these are the kind of things that as you start to capture that information, as you start to know and understand your audience base, you can also build the right content for them. One of the misconceptions about Museum of Ice Cream is that it's only for children. But that's not the case at all. We have a lot of really great fun experiences for adults, for friend groups, for bachelorette parties. We actually just introduced a new Cardi B Whip Shots partnership where we have all of these boozy beverages that you can enjoy. So that's the kind of thing that we have to think through our audience, but really understand what's the emotional tie that they have. And every single person probably has an emotional memory that they can think of about ice cream. Whether it's a good one, like spending time with your family, or if it's a bad one after a bad breakup. Nobody loves ice cream more than someone who's sitting on the couch enjoying their pint of Ben and Jerry's. So those types of things are really emotional connections that we can leverage not only from the content that they're creating on our behalf, but also that we can develop for individuals to say, hey, have a great time. That's the whole purpose of what we're here for, and we want you to enjoy it the way in which you are interested in, but we appeal to a variety of different audiences.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can't think of anybody that doesn't enjoy ice cream. If you do, we may not be friends. But you do you. Teach their own, right?
Yes.
It's funny, I was telling my sister-in-law that I was moderating this discussion today, and she mentioned that. She's like, oh, you're my nephew, her son, she's like, that's a museum that Austin would actually like to go to. One where you can enjoy ice cream in real life and eat as much as you want. So we'll have to check it out.
Absolutely.
So we're talking about user-generated content. You're having to pay to amplify it. How, knowing that you do have all these different audiences, and there's a lot of ways that you can message and repurpose the user-generated content. How do you know what to lean into? And kind of walk us through that, like the data input to what that output looks like for you guys when we're talking about that connection from the data insight to the emotional storytelling that you're talking about.
That's a really great question, just because when I came onto the organization, we're definitely a little bit more nascent in terms of our data analytics. We don't have a traditional data team. We're not necessarily leaning into some of the more in-depth CDPs, things like that. And so when you think about it from trying to really make sure that you're sending the right marketing message to our audience, we didn't necessarily know, well, who's coming to Museum of Ice Cream? We knew from Google Analytics and things like that, general audiences or some high-level demographics. But what's interesting about the way in which we think about our business is sometimes you actually just have to do boots on the ground and stand outside of your location and see who's coming in. And so that was one of the really great ways that we were able to just high-level understand through looking who's showing up. And we saw bachelorette parties. It was friend groups. It was parents. It was, a lot of individuals who were looking for date nights. So those are the kind of things that when you actually then stood inside of your location and just looked around, we could then take that information and match it back to what we were seeing and then proceed to create the right audience creative and then put it out into the atmosphere and then see what worked. Mm-hmm. Who was resonating with what type of content, what types of things were they interested in, what types of things were they looking for. And so that's what's been fascinating about the digital journey is that, especially again with an experiential brand, we're in an interesting situation that we don't necessarily have a lot of repeat visitorship. So we really have to push people at the very top of the funnel to drive people in. And our repeat visitor rate is probably not even 10%. So we really rely on, one, just getting the name, the brand out there, getting people familiar. But even more so, it's really building that vision for them. And so based off of what resonates with you, and that's one of the things that I really enjoyed about one of the previous speakers was they were saying you don't fit into only one persona. You match based off of the time frame, what's happening with you at any point in time, and we're exactly the same in terms of what we're offering. And then each of our locations is different. And that's what's one of the fun things about the business is what you're going to see in New York isn't necessarily the same thing that you're going to see in Chicago, in Austin, in our Singapore location. And so that's how we're also trying to build repeat visitorship, which says, hey, yeah, I know you think you've been to Museum of Ice Cream, but if you haven't been to the New York one, you have got to go down our 3-story slide, which is the largest indoor slide in New York. But if you haven't been to the Chicago one, we have a very, what's polarizing, but we have a Chicago ice cream dog where you put mustard and relish on this ice cream hot dog. So those are the kind of things that are really great to be able to build, but also to set expectations with our guests. So that if you see a visualization of what you plan to experience, we want to make sure that that matches with what you then proceed to experience. So we don't want to show you a 3-story slide if you're going to our Chicago location because you're immediately going to get in there and you're going to say, well, where's the slide? There isn't one, right? And so those are the kind of things that we have to think about and the nuance in which we take. But all of that is also backed in both on the ground, anecdotal data, but then we also take that, we manipulate it based off of then proceeding to make the right content and then use the data analytics that we do have to then match up and associate with the appropriate individuals and audiences.
Do you have any data on how many people like the Chicago dog ice cream?
It's about 50-50. It's surprisingly.
Wow.
Yes, you'd be surprised, but it's also kind of one of those things, people love sweet and salty. It's kind of like, if you know, but also if you're not a mustard fan, you're probably not going to like it. So.
Yeah. So go and report back. Everybody, apparently it's 50-50. I think I fall in the no camp myself. We did talk about this on our call earlier this week, and you kind of touched on it in your answer just now, but it would be great if you could talk a little bit about how you are trying to drive repeat visitors or visitors who've been to one location and you'd like to get them to go to another location, and just some of those initiatives that you're taking, because you have a background in loyalty marketing, right?
I do. A big shout out to IHG. I was also a former IHGer, but all about loyalty, right? So we think about it in terms of most companies that we're familiar with, eCommerce, retail, QSR, all thinking about repeat visitorship. Really spend most of your time on that 20% of your audience who's bringing in 80% of your revenue. Mm-hmm. We do not have that luxury. So what we think about in terms of repeat visitorship is thinking about all the local individuals who might be interested in visiting our locations. And this is something that I'm really passionate about because it gives us the ability to not only say, hey, we're an experiential brand and we have essentially an amusement that you can go to, but we're more meaningful than that. We want ourselves to become the authority on ice cream. Why shouldn't the Museum of Ice Cream be the authority on ice cream? But you can't just call yourself an authority and then be like, well, I'm an authority on this thing and go about your day. So what we have to do is we have to back that up. And so what we've been able to do in generating not only potential repeat visitorship, but also that authority on ice cream is really highlighting all of our local owned creameries in the locations of our museums. And so that's been a really great ability for us to do, most recently for Black History Month in Chicago, in Austin, in New York. We actually highlighted a really great Black-owned creamery that was doing fantastic things, not only in their community, but around ice cream. And so Museum of Ice Cream doesn't necessarily make our own ice cream. We either purchase from vendors or we try and buy locally. So we can't say we're the authority on making ice cream, but what we can say is we're the authority on people who make ice cream. And so really what I loved about this was the authenticity that it brings which says, hey, we're not saying that we're the experts here, but what we want to do is give the spotlight to the experts and really showcase the great things that they're doing. And one of my favorite stories is about Ida's Artisan Ice Cream that's in Chicago. And so when Ida was going through COVID, unfortunately she got let go from her job, and she's sitting at home. She's got, just piles of stuff in the back, and she's like, I am so stressed out, I need to find a job. And she accidentally looks and kicks over this ice cream maker that someone had given her as a gift. She's like, well, I've got some time on my hands, might as well make some ice cream. Ended up making really fantastic homemade ice cream with her friends and family, shared it to the point where she actually approached us and she said, hey, I'm doing some great things here. I would love to know, would you be interested in possibly partnering with us? Mm-hmm. We said, absolutely. And so what ended up happening was Ida was able to not only sell her ice cream to Museum of Ice Cream, but also was able to build that partnership into opening up her own brick and mortar. And then most recently, she partnered with Kellanova, who's Kellogg's brand, and made a specialty Pop-Tarts ice cream using their strawberry and cupcake confetti Pop-Tarts, and that's only found at our locations. So not only is it Ida doing phenomenal things, but it's us having the exclusivity to say, hey, you know what? Ida's Artisan Ice Cream here is doing really great work. We want you to try it, and the only place that you can do it right now is at our location. So if you're a Chicago native and you like ice cream and you like Pop-Tarts, come on by, check us out. And that really, to me, brought the authenticity around the Heritage Month to be able to showcase what we were doing locally, but also to become that authority on ice cream that we're interested in doing.
Are there any future activations for, as we look ahead, for this year that folks, since there's a lot of people who have not been to the museum, or if you've been before, for those of you that raised your hand, since you're looking to have repeat visitors, that folks can look forward to at any of the locations or all of them?
Yes, we are very excited because one of our tentpole moments is National Ice Cream Day, which is on July the 22nd. And so last year we did a really phenomenal activation where we actually took out our sprinkle pools. We created these gigantic sprinkle pools, activated them in really large locations. So in New York, it was in Hudson Yards. And we did it on 6th Street in Austin. And people waited in line for 3 hours plus to play in a sprinkle pool. And so that to me is what I love about this brand. And people ask me, like, is this a fun job? And it's like, it is a really fun job because truly, and it sounds so cheesy, it's like I sell joy for a living. The whole purpose of you coming to this location is to have fun. And so especially as an adult where sometimes it feels a little like silly and you're like, oh no, I kind of want to be cool, I'm an adult. That's not the purpose of why you show up at all. And so for us, that's one of the big things actually when you come in. Anyone who joins the team at Museum of Ice Cream actually has to create their own ice cream name. And so when you start working, you have to provide them a list of names that you want to use as your ice cream name, and people use them. So my name is Peppermint, and that's your email address. So it's peppermint@museumoficecream.com, which is a little silly when you are trying to give people your email address. But really great for cold calling, because no one can ever guess what your email address is.
Yeah, when I got your email, I was like, who is Peppermint?
Exactly. But
I'm supposed to be talking
especially when I try to convince my father that I have a real job, and he's like, I'm not sure if I believe you. But, that's what's fun about it. And even when you show up to our locations, you walk in and the first thing you do is you create your own ice cream name tag. And so I shared this antidote with you, but it's always so fun because you learn a lot about the people that you're with. Mm-hmm. And so we just recently took our children there, and so I'm, of course, Peppermint. We've got a fish food, we've got an Oreo, and then we've got a hot fudge, and then we've got Bob. So, you just kind of learn a lot about your family, you learn a lot about your friends. We're not really sure what Bob is in terms of ice cream, but I think that's what's so fun about it is the purpose of why we do that is to leave your old self behind so that you can slough off the seriousness, you can play in sprinkles, you can eat unlimited ice cream, have 15 cotton candies, that's totally fine. And it feels so silly, but it's like those are the things that it's so serious all the time. So when you come into this place that you're paying to visit, have a great time. Like if you leave and you're like, it was fine, you weren't doing it the right way. right? Because there's no way that you can sit and watch kids play in a sprinkle pool and they just dive in. They slide down the slide, they have a phenomenal time, and then the best part is to see an adult in there just throwing sprinkles up, swimming in sprinkles, right? And it's silly, but it's so fun. And that's the thing that I love about this job is it's authentically fun, and that's the only reason why you're there, is to have a good time.
That sounds great. I think maybe we should have a future brand Innovators event at Museum of Ice Cream, maybe the New York location. Yeah, round of applause. We'll start a petition. So, okay, we've got a couple more minutes. I'd just love to get some final thoughts from you on the theme today is data and emotional storytelling. Obviously, Museum of Ice Cream has got that emotional component and the emotional connection down. We talked about how it's really to inspire joy and reconnect in person with family and friends and even like yourself, right? So can you talk to us a little bit, just some final thoughts on where Museum of Ice Cream is headed from a data-led standpoint, like as far as messaging and enhancing the experience, or if there's anything you'd like to say just to kind of close this out?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that we are really leaning into is, no real surprise, our guest feedback. What's kind of fascinating about these types of locations, kind of similar to if you experience anything that gets built over time, is it takes time, and especially in these types of experiences where people are expecting more and more, by the time you open, you're already behind. And so what people are expecting to see and experience with all of our new locations is absolutely vital that we get feedback and we incorporate all of the feedback that we receive from our guests in the locations that we have and incorporate that into our new locations. And so some of the feedback that we've gotten just frankly is, I thought it was going to be different. And so that tells us a few different things. One is we didn't meet their expectations. Or two, we didn't set expectations. Mm-hmm. And so when we're able to understand what is that expectation that you had, we can either build it for the future or do a better job of informing you what you're going to experience. And so a few of the things that we've done with that is guest surveys, all of the type of, NPS surveying, things like that. But ultimately, it's also just watching people engage with the space. And so I know we speak a lot about data, but in some of these instances, I would say that there's nothing better than knowing what people are doing. And a big piece of that is even as we go in, again, this is built for adults, but also for children. And all of our signage is way too tall, even for me, I'm 5 feet tall, way too tall for children to see. And so you're like, well, how are the kids supposed to know what ice cream flavor that they're getting ready to eat? They can't see any of the signs. Mm-hmm. They can't look into the case. So just little things like that are data points that we know and understand. And I also think data and the way we think about it isn't always just technological data. It's not just digital data. It's data points that we gather through experiencing in person. Because you can't explain through data some emotional connections. You can't tell a computer what it's like to eat ice cream, right? So those are the kind of things that we really lean into, which is use the data that you have, really lean into it. But in some of the instances, emotion outweighs that experience. And so you're going to be able to get really impactful, meaningful data coming from the emotional experience that you actually have.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for being here.